All right, so I like to watch my competition and see what videos they make, because making 365 videos a year is pretty daunting task to do it since 2015. And I was watching a video from a competitor. They put out a lot of good content, and they like to feature different people that are doing well in the business. And the content was about how this particular individual was closing business. And I just couldn't help myself listening to it to roll my eyes and think about how stupid the advice that was being given on how to close, which led me to this video on the worst ways to close your final expense presentations. So what I'm going to do is detail what I heard in this video and tell you why it's the dumbest way to sell, because there's so many problems that come from a strategy like what was taught from this particular individual. And what I'm going to do instead is actually tell you what you should be focusing on when you're closing, because very much how you close is going to depend on your ability to keep the business closed. And in a big thing here, in a big picture, the problem with this particular closing strategy is that it focused on a contingent close, meaning that other things had to happen before closing it, and it was dependent upon time passing. In other words, you couldn't close right there on the spot. So we're going to talk more about that in a minute. My name is David Duford. I own Duford Insurance Group. I train and recruit agents nationally to sell final expense, Medicare, and annuities face-to-face and over the phone. If you happen to enjoy this content, subscribe, please. I'd appreciate it. Like the video, and if you want to learn more about my agency, there's links above or below. Happy to show you how it works. Okay, so in this video that I was reviewing, this particular agent was talking about a style of close that I just hate, and it's so problematic, you're going to figure out right away why it's the case. And what she was saying in this video was, in her closing strategy, she likes to submit the policy, and she tells the client this, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to get the policy done, and we're going to submit it, and then we're just going to see if it's going to be approved. So here's the problem I have with this particular strategy. If you're using a carrier that doesn't give you an instant decision on the front end, and you have to submit to see if it gets approved, the problem with it is you're delaying the decision making that's so important, plus delaying the ultimate decision on getting the underwriting completed. Here's what I mean by that. So how much are you really closing when you're telling the client that they don't have to make a commitment today, right? And how many times have people changed their mind when they receive a not 100% sure decision on their underwriting, or they don't have to make a decision. You give them room to decide ultimately if they really want it or not. And so the problem that I have with this, let's submit it and see what happens if it's approved, is that you're giving this space for the client to relent, to change their mind, to have buyer's remorse. And what you should be doing instead, in final expense at least, is you need to be using carriers that actually approve your client for some kind of coverage. You don't want to be selling carriers where you don't get an instant decision. And there are carriers out there that are available that sometimes are useful, but other times they don't issue a decision a good chunk of the time. And that is literally money seeping through your fingers that you won't recover, because sometimes what you submit doesn't get approved as is. And when time passes without a decision, people get out of that little miraculous state they're in, where they're open to buying stuff, and get back to their cheap procrastinating ways. So don't allow yourself to run a business and choose carriers where you have to say something like, let's submit it to see if it gets approved, because you're just giving yourself a lot of problems that you don't have to have, because there are good carriers that will approve on the spot and get you closed and get the client committed right there and then on that first call. The other close that I hate this close. It's so stupid. It is the using this close in the beginning. This is a Hail Mary close. This is something you want to use later when nothing else works and you got nothing else to lose. And it's this 30-day grace period close. When you start closing with a 30-day grace period, you say something like, hey, Mrs. Jones, let's submit this to see if this gets approved. Once we get the decision back, you'll have 30 days to ultimately make up your mind if this is a good choice for you. This is a non-committal type of close that allows the client not to make a decision. You think you're closing the deal because you wrote an app, because you took banking information or social security numbers. And yeah, you're closer to closing for sure, and some of this will. But you're not closing it for real. You're closing it on your end, but is the client closing it on their end? In other words, are they actually committed to buying the policy? Are they on board 100%? When you tell them, especially early on, that they don't have to decide, they've got 30 days to do it, you're giving them the opportunity to procrastinate that much longer. One thing that's really important, guys, about final expense, and I always reference John Duggar, great agent. If you'd like to watch some of his content, put David Dufour, John Duggar into YouTube. He's got great stuff. John Duggar said that final expense prospects are world-class procrastinators, okay? Most people are, actually, but especially final expense. And the worst thing you want to do is give them an opportunity to let their procrastination genes reflect, okay? So don't let them. How do you do that? Well, you don't mention that they've got 30 days for a grace period, unless you've tried closing 3, 4, 5 other ways to deal with this kind of stalling tactic they're giving you, and that's the last thing you give them. I'm okay with a close like that. I would call it kind of the Hail Mary close. It's like, when all else fails, you do that. But you don't start the close with the 30-day observation or grace period close, because you're just going to invite more people to cancel. And what you close actually wasn't closed, which means you didn't close anything. And the third point here, I guess, is kind of reiteration here, is just non-committal to the option. So sometimes people will say, hey, look, we'll just submit this in, we'll start it at the higher price, or we'll start it at the lower price, and then you can call me over the next couple of days and tell me which one you want to do, and then we'll change it at that point. What you're doing there when you're closing on that strategy, you're basically saying, look, you don't have to pick a choice today. You can wait a couple of days to ultimately decide. Again, this is the same thing I've been talking about. You're in a position where you're giving your clients an out. They don't have to decide. They just have to sign this thing, and then they can decide not to take it later, which happens a lot. So what do you do instead? If somebody's not sure about what they want, you need to tell them to buy something, and then basically put the impetus on them to contact you if they ever want to add more or if they want to change it, and then set a short deadline. So sometimes when I close, I'll have somebody say, well, I don't know exactly what I want. I do want something, but I don't know what it is. And then I'll say, okay, here's my recommendation. Let's go ahead and start with the least expensive one, so that way it fits your budget the easiest. And then basically, if you ever want to add more coverage, just give me a call. We can definitely add more later. I just want to make sure this is comfortable for you. And so that way you have peace of mind, you can get started with something. That makes sense to you, Mr. Prospect? Sure. Okay, who do you want your beneficiary to be? So I just close on the least one, because at least I close and resolve this today. Again, I don't want to close something on another day that I could close today, right? I want every single deal closed completely, conceptually, by both parties, thus the last time I'm going to be there. And here's the thing, guys, and I think this is kind of wrapping this up, the last couple of points here to bring up. You got to understand that the beauty of final expense is really had when you understand that you're in a one-call close business. And what one-call close means is that the close happens in one call, but the definition of close is that everything that's required to put a policy into force has been done, it's been completed. And that's things like not just the application, it's not just the approval process, but it's the belief process on behalf of the client too. They've got to believe and be committed and convicted to what it is that they chose. And if you're not closing them on their conviction and belief and making them decide and take action, and you're instead putting off that decision in the future, you're not doing them a service. You're allowing a person who, generally speaking, puts major decisions off to do the same behavior pattern they've always done. This is in part why they're 60 and 70 years old and don't have life insurance, because they're allowed to behave in this non-functional way that is ultimately not going to serve the people that they love. Your prospects need you to tell them what to do, guys, okay? They need somebody firm. They need somebody with leadership. And you have to close with that leadership if you want your prospect to stay and to buy and to be covered. And when the time comes, to have the peace of mind that they ultimately want. And you have to close the right way in order to get it. If you don't, then you lose deals. You lose money that you could have easily had. Your clients aren't served. And you're probably going to increase your chances of failure dramatically. And all the people you could have served never would have been served. So guys, that's what you've got to do. Close to get the deal done to get them committed and convicted, as well as underwritten, approved, and the application complete. Do that, no problems. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this training on how to really close your final expense business. If you'd like to learn more, I do this kind of training all the time for my agents and on this YouTube channel as well. Subscribe and like, and go to the links above or below if you're interested in joining DeFord Insurance Group to sell insurance, final expense specifically, as well as Medicare and annuities. And thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.